So good afternoon, colleagues. We will be starting the meeting in about 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, Excellencies, dear colleagues, we will now begin our program. Please be seated. Yeah. So I'm Yoon Ho Kang, ECOSOC lead at the Permanent Mission of Republic of Korea to the UN, and I will be the moderator today. I'm honored to welcome all of you to today's side event on development effectiveness and quality of financing. We have more than 100 participants registered today's event, but let's see how many will come. But indeed, we have very diverse participants today, including from CSOs, government from various ministries and missions, a parliament, and philanthropic organizations to academia. So I'm confident that perspectives from such diverse participation will bring enriching discussions on today's topic. To begin, Ambassador Charlotta Schuliter from Permanent Mission of Sweden and Ambassador Hyunwoo Cho from Permanent Mission of ROK will deliver opening remarks. So, Ambassador Schuliter, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here and great for the mission of Sweden to co-host together with the mission of the Republic of Korea. And I'm glad that so many others from the partnership, which consists of many different stakeholders, is here today. There's clearly a need to revitalize the effectiveness agenda. And I think what's particularly mentioned is implementation. And what better opportunity than the FFD process to try and do that. And this is also why the partnership co-chairs and the steering committee members representing all stakeholders in development cooperation have concluded that we'll try and bring together the global monitoring round that's happening now, and which 59 countries have signed up to, and that can then contribute with key evidence on the state of play of effectiveness, and then feed into the process. So the monitoring results in turn can then help drive political action for a sustainable impact. Now the final results from this monitoring will be published in 2026 only, but there's already results having come in, and we're going to hear about some of that today. And there have also been short briefings with insights published on the first 11 countries. Once I have the floor, I'd just like to say a few things about the Swedish government's approach to development effectiveness in the context of our own development cooperation. A few focus areas: results. Swedish aid initiatives are designed to create and support concrete results. Focused resource allocation, and that's something we're looking at more and more to make sure that aid is not spread too thin, and that we focus on activities that really make a difference. Evidence-based approach, obviously, to try and achieve the best possible outcomes, and we need to rely on evidence, on examples from evaluations and research. Accountability, obviously, we're committed to delivering high-quality aid that achieves tangible results, and obviously countries wouldn't be very interested in having us involved in it if that wasn't the expectation. So those are a few things. I also want to mention transparency, and transparency is something one does have to think about, especially when it's taxpayers' money is invested and lots of interest in what the aid efforts consist in. We do try to make as much as possible public and easy to find, and we have a platform called OpenAid, where you can search your way through to find out about the aid activities. So I wanted to mention that. Collaborative partnerships, synergies with the private sector, and I know there's a lot of different events going on about that, and about the engagement of the private sector being something that we hope can come to a shift with some momentum ahead of FFD4. Obviously mobilizing investments using aid as a catalyst. So those are a few areas that I wanted to take the chance of mentioning, but now let's move on to hear from others. Thank you.
So, thank you, Ambassador, for your thoughtful remarks. As we all know, Sweden has been an exemplary ODA contributor, and in 1975 became the first country to meet the 0.7 GNI to ODA commitment. And also Sweden's strong commitment to aligning its ODA to SDGs, as well as its leadership in the development effectiveness discussions, have been receiving the very much positive assessment. So we look forward to Sweden's continued commitment to leave no one behind. And now I will pass the floor to Ambassador Cho. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, excellencies, and the distinguished guests. It's a privilege to welcome you all to the side event along with my dear Swedish colleagues, Ambassador Schulte, and then GPEDC co-chairs. As we consider revitalizing the development effectiveness agenda in FFD4, it will be crucial to take a step forward and build on progress achieved in Addis Ababa rather than going backwards on the commitments. In doing so, we should focus on the implementation of the GPEDC principles, and then integrate lessons learned from ongoing development experiences and strengthen partnership. With that, I'd like to share a few thoughts on the GPEDC. First, Korea's development experience is the embodiment of the GPEDC principles. When Korea hosted the first high-level forum on aid effectiveness in 2011, we had ambition to present a new vision of development in Busan Agreement and then GPEDC. GPEDC 4 principles, which is country ownership, focus on results, inclusive partnership, transparency, and mutual accountability, are aligned with the principles that drove success of our own development journey. In our development efforts, Korean government established the Economic Planning Board in 1961 and implemented the iterations of the 5-year economic development plans, which placed country ownership, national priority, locally driven actions at the core. Then, Bureau of Statistics within the Economic Planning Board focused on the results, transparency and accountability by monitoring, evaluating the development initiatives with a clear reporting mechanisms. This ensured data-driven planning and policy adjustments based on results, which propelled development effectiveness and maximized the impact of limited resources. And of course, these efforts were shared by all stakeholders, including public-private partnership that ensured economic growth and technology advancements, and the CSO engagement that generated actions to leave no one behind. Second, GPEDC marks the monumental paradigm shift in the international development cooperation that was only possible through the mobilizations of all stakeholders, not only the traditional donors. The 2011 Busan Forum was a truly inclusive meeting that brought together more than 300,000 participants from most of the UN member states and more than 70 international institutions, private sector representatives, and other stakeholders. The constructive engagement of all stakeholders was the key in establishing the GPEDC as a new framework of development cooperation that moved away from donor-driven aid-centric approach to inclusive development-centric partnership. This allowed the GPEDC to better reflect the evolving development cooperation architecture and use complementary roles of all actors to catalyze development impact. Distinguished guests, as we head to Sevilla this summer, Korea will continue to contribute to the FFD discussions based on the lessons learned from our own development experience. Simultaneously, we will continue to increase our ODA contributions to uphold our commitments. Last year, we increased our ODA by 31%, adding on to the 21% increase the year before, despite tight financial conditions. Since joining the OECD Development Assistance Committee 15 years ago, we had more than quadrupled our ODA contributions. In closing, Korea will continue to provide an open space where we can exchange ideas and experiences in implementing the principles of the GPEDC. I look forward to hearing your all thoughts today. I really appreciate your participation and attention today. Thank you.
So thank you, Ambassador Joe, for your remarks. So this is actually a great segue to transition into our discussions today. As Ambassador Joe highlighted, the effectiveness principles are particularly meaningful to Korea because we were able to mobilize the necessary multi-stakeholder partnerships to shift the development cooperation paradigm from aid-centric to development-centric based on Korea's own development experiences. So, Excellencies, FFD4 is a critical moment to ensure that the quality and the effectiveness of development cooperations are prioritized hand in hand with quantity of financing. On Tuesday, we also hosted an informal meeting on development effectiveness where we discussed how to ensure multi-stakeholder partnership in development cooperation and how to bring the GPEDCs to UN sphere. We will continue to have these open and inclusive discussions to promote the implementations of GPEDC principles. Before we begin the panel discussions, I'd like to highlight that we have among us Nepal and Zambia, co-facilitators of the FFD4 outcome document. I want to express my special gratitude to your ongoing efforts and leadership in the drafting the FFD4 outcome document. Ambassador Thapa, the PR of Nepal, was unable to make today's event due to unforeseen circumstances, but we are very much honored to have Mr. Sharma, Director General for Economic Cooperation and Coordination Bureau from the Ministry of Finance to set the scene. Mr. Sharma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here in this very crucial panel discussion. Nepal has been actively engaging with GPEDC activities Nepal has successfully completed the monitoring process of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, and the result have now been released. This exercise has provided valuable insights and a tentative roadmap for enhancing the effectiveness of development cooperation moving forward. Let me highlight some key findings of our exercise. The monitoring results underscore the need to strengthen engagement and dialogue with a diverse range of stakeholders in development planning while enhancing accountability mechanism. Greater emphasis must be placed on developing a robust accountability mechanism. Encouragingly, development partners are increasingly using country-owned results framework to guide their intervention. The findings indicate a need for further strengthening of public finance management system. Nepal performs well in terms of transparency, as information related to development cooperation is widely available, and most development partners have established a country strategy. However, the country currently lacks a mutual accountability mechanism for development cooperation. So while Nepal has policy strategy for engaging with the private sector, it remains incomplete and requires further refinement. So I want to highlight three critical issues in reference to Nepal in mobilizing development cooperation. The first one is the gap between commitment and disbursement funds. Furthermore, most public investment projects face time and cost overrun, which not only diminish the project's projected financial and economic rate of returns, but also increase external debt-related risks, including exchange rate fluctuation and debt servicing burden. The second one is a substantial portion, around 30% of ODA, is out of the Nepal national system and priorities. In bilateral grant assistance, around only 15% is channelized through the country budget system, with the remainder being implemented directly by development partners, their own agencies. So this undermines the localization efforts and national ownership. Over 20 development partners operate in Nepal, each of its own requirements for environmental and social safeguards, procurement, PFM, and other, leading to increased transaction and coordination cost. So despite these challenges, there are also some very good opportunities as well. We have successfully implemented full funding mechanism, allowing development partners to collaborate on specific programs. Similarly, co-financing arrangements have been initiated for investment projects in which we deal with the lead development partner and other DPs follow the lead development partner's requirement and conditions. Efforts are underway to enhance procurement policies and PFM strategies to better align with development partners' procurement guidelines. A new development cooperation policy is being formulated in consultation with the development partners to ensure better alignment of national priorities with their country partnership policies. So the monitoring exercise has reinforced the importance of national ownership, and we are working to align national and development partners' project pipelines. Additionally, PFM reforms are being prioritized to bring more ODA within the national budget framework. The findings also highlighted the need to establish a mutual accountability mechanism to enhance private sector engagement and further strengthening PFM system, which are crucial for effective development cooperation. So lastly, I hope today's discussion will further give very important insights to development effectiveness and the quality of financing that should be reflected in FFD document. With this, let me stop here. Thank you. Back to you, moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for sharing with us key findings and the lessons learned from the monitoring exercise, and including the challenges as well as opportunities, and highlighting the importance of developing effectiveness as a pathway to the sustainable development. Just a quick housekeeping before we proceed further. Our first panel is on reflecting back on effectiveness challenges, opportunities, and progress on commitments. And the second panel will share their views on looking ahead at the changing global architecture. Please keep in mind that all the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions after the 2 rounds of panel discussions. And for panelists, please keep your remarks under 5 minutes, given the time limitations today. Now, allow me to briefly provide some background on global partnership monitoring exercise before we jump into the discussion. The monitoring exercise is a partner country-led tool that helps country governments and development actors assess progress, opportunities, and obstacles to achieving more effective development cooperation. It promotes collective accountability through the lens of 4 effectiveness principles. That's country ownership, focus on results, inclusive partnership, transparency, and mutual accountability. More than 100 countries have committed to the development effectiveness principles by participating in monitoring them in past rounds, reaffirming that there are strong needs for development cooperation to be effective as possible. So now the 2 representatives from Zambia and Yemen are joining us today as a panel. Zambia, Yemen, as well as Nepal and Indonesia are 4 of the 59 countries to have completed the GPDC monitoring exercise in the 2023 to 2026 round, and also 4 out of 11 countries that are the first to complete data collection and their preliminary observations have been published in the GPDC website. We also have a representative from Australia with us today. Australia is an active supporter of development effectiveness and also represent development partners on the steering committee of the GPDC. So please welcome Ms. Prudence Kamoa of Zambia and Mr. Shuaib Al-Zahir of Yemen, and also Dr. Anthony Swan of Australia on my left side. So my first question is to Mr. Shuaib Al-Zahir, Deputy Minister and the Chief of Technical Office at the Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation in Yemen. He was leading the planning and coordination of development cooperation with the international partners in Yemen. So the first question is that how is country ownership evolving in Yemen's context? And as a partner country, what has emerged from your participation in the Global Partnership Monitoring Exercise? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kang, and thanks to Mr. Sharma for setting the stage for this important discussion, and also I extend my gratitude to the co-host Sweden and Republic of Korea for organizing this event and providing a platform to reflect on the development effectiveness. Certainly Yemen's participation in the GPDC 4th exercise has been very challenging and enlightening. And looking at the first part of your question on the evolution of country ownership, I think I need to look at it from 3 perspectives. The first one is the context of fragility and conflict, and the other one is the national development plans that we have and the progress in coordination mechanism. So, I think our experience aligns with that book by Pablo Yanguas on why we lie about politics and why we lie about aid, where he highlights that fragility and conflict complicate traditional development approaches. And when we come to context and fragility, Yemen's development landscape is not an easy one to understand, especially to the internationally recognized government, where controls 75% of the country and around 48% of the population, where there is another militia controlling the capital and around 52% of the population in the other side. And it's very important to know how you can collect your information, your data, and you make this task successful when it comes to monitoring and also to monitor your aid and to talk that about proper ownership. So despite these challenges, the government remained committed to ensure development cooperation aligns with national priorities. However, the fragility of the institutions and the lack of a stable environment have made it difficult for us to fully exercise country ownership, especially in the areas that are not under our control as a government. On the national development plans, and it is a foundation for talking about ownership. So we developed different plans in 2018, in 2021, but these were like, short plans. You are in a conflict. So if you have a long-term plan with macro indicators and so on, you need to have a consensus, and you need to have lots of surveys on household, on population and everything, but you cannot have that with this situation. So you cannot have like a 5-10 years plan. So we have these like short-term plans that we develop and we also share with the donors. However, the implementation of these plans have been hindered by the lack of predictable funding and the fragmentation of development cooperation. Not even the fragmentation, it's the dissolvement of these development cooperation, because it's not done by the development partners. It's done by third parties, done by fourth and fifth parties who are in Yemen, and the development partners are not there except one or two who are operating there. So when we have to meet all these development partners, we have to travel to Riyadh, to Saudi, where they are, or to Jordan. So that thing on the alignment is difficult. Even yesterday, we had a meeting in Jordan with all the development partners to align our new plans with them. We had to go to them and to tell them how we can align that. So this is how we are working in terms of the plan, and it's not like for 3 or 4 years it's getting difficult. The other one is the progress and coordination mechanism. This has led us to have like a humanitarian one and the development one. For the humanitarian one, the UN is doing its work in terms of coordination, clusters with the societies, with the government, with others. Even that was evolving with them over the last 10 years, where they can do the surveys and everything for the response plan every year and to do all the surveys. But now it's going better than before, especially when it comes to food security and the rest. When we move to the emergency and the development, we still need to align that plan furthermore on that coordination. Now there is like a coordination group at the high level, but still with the Prime Minister office. It's not as it used before the war with the Ministry of Planning and the ministries. It's still with certain politicians with certain ideas. When the politician goes and another politician comes, it becomes difficult. But some institutions insist, like the multilateral, the MDBs, they say we have the institutions, we need to work through the institutions, which is good. So the key insights and results that we take from the GBDC, it's the whole society engagement. I'll give you some data. Yemen has seen moderate improvement in stakeholder engagement with a score of 0.5, up from 0.32 in 2018. Parliament oversight has significantly increased to 0.69, which reflects stronger engagement in national institutions. We have seen that the enabling environment remains challenged, with only slight improvement of 0.52. When we talk about the CSOs and the civil societies, we're not just talking about the government, we're talking about the area in the Houthi. So we have to have that number. The other thing is the use of country system and transparency, and not leaving one behind. But the lessons that we really need to take from this, as Her Excellency spoke, is transparency and accountability learning, enhanced data collection, inclusive dialogue with all these institutions. And there is an opportunity, but the main one is adapting to fragility. We have, when we talk about fragility, we have to play politics, and we have to understand politics from our side and from the donors. It's all now, the development is about politics, understanding power dynamics, working through the domestic actors, and also it's becoming day-to-day work. It's becoming everyday political analysis for us. And to do that, you have to be adaptable, flexible, and we have to have long-term support to achieve it. We thank the GBDC for that, because it has showed us lots of findings, and we can even share it in other platforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentations and sharing the experience of Yemen. And I think the Deputy Minister made several points to notice, especially in places like Yemen at this moment, and telling us that the effectiveness principles is still very much relevant in humanitarian and development crisis, where the diverse development actors are engaged. And also you mentioned adapting to the fragility, and also the whole society engagement. I think after this meeting, the steering committee also could further discuss how to make greater connections onto these issues with the GPDC. And for the whole society engagement, I think our second round of panel will have chance to explain further on that part. And now turning to Ms. Prudence Kamoa, the Acting Permanent Secretary at the Planning and Administration in Zambia. Ms. Kamoa has more than 20 years of experience in public service, and she is an expert in monitoring and evaluations, social economic planning, and the project management, which are all crucial elements when it comes to the development effectiveness. So, Ms. Prudence Kamoa, may I ask the first question? What are the most significant country-level challenges in delivering effective development cooperations and leaving no one behind?
First and foremost, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizers of this important side event, and also thank my fellow panelists who are bringing very important insights into this discussion, and also the participants of this meeting. To answer the question that has been put to the fore, first and foremost, I would like to just inform the meeting that Zambia is one of the countries, as mentioned earlier, that is participating in the 4th global round for monitoring of development cooperation. And we have gone through this process, and we have reached an advanced stage to the extent where our, I think, findings of the monitoring round have been concluded and published, and we are just awaiting the policy brief to be included on the website so that people can see what's come out of that process. And also just to mention that Zambia has been really committed to the principles of the GPDC over the years, and we have implemented quite a number of reforms around entrenching the principles of aid effectiveness. And as a country, we even have a development cooperation policy, which has been formulated with an implementation plan that brings in some of the important elements of development cooperation in there. So in terms of the constraints or challenges that we have faced in this field, I would say that we have been implementing or we have been really engaged with development partners over the years, especially considering that the country has been facing resource constraints. This is in view of the fact that we have a Vision 2030 for the to develop the country that has important aspirations to see us up to 2030 as a upper middle income country. And as a result, we have high expectations and aspirations from our society in terms of development. And because of this, we have had a quite good interaction with cooperating partners who have come on board to support our national vision, and as well as our medium-term development frameworks that we have implemented over the years. What has come out of this interaction is that the resource constraints and fiscal challenges that we have faced as a country, and our inviting interaction with partners in the development field has shown that engagement with partners actually requires, it's quite complex and requires a very good coordination mechanism. And this coordination mechanism should be built on trust from both parties, and it should ensure that everybody who is participating in the development field understands the long-term vision for the country in terms of development, is fully engaged in terms of the aligning to the principles of development effectiveness, and also ensures that they are in support of government-owned processes and are also able to cooperate in the various platforms that government puts in place to engage with its development partners. We have seen that the multiplicity of development partners, both from within the country and from outside the country, has been quite a challenge in terms of coordination. We have had good progress with development partners who have self-coordinated and have come up with a group that meets with government periodically to discuss development issues, as well as also sharing information about the support that is being provided to the country's development framework. but we also have within the ecosystem challenges around not really having full engagement of other smaller non-state actors into the development field, to the extent that we do not have sufficient data or information coming from some players in terms of how much and the scope of support or engagement in our development framework. That has been a challenge and has provided difficulties for governments to fully account for support that's coming to the country in terms of the various areas of development for the country. We have also seen that there's been an issue with predictability of support. We did, using our joint assistance strategy, agree that we will be getting information as a country with regard to how much support would be coming to the various sectors of our development framework, and then when we are doing the medium-term expenditure frameworks and our annual budgets, that we were going to have budget estimates that would be provided by our partners to complement what government would be able to put as outlays for development in that period. This has been a problem. It has not really worked as agreed over the years, and as a result, it has been very difficult for government to effectively plan its development comprehensively, with full knowledge of how much resources are expected to be provided in the various areas of the development plan. We have seen that the lack of predictability has therefore entailed that certain sectors or programs of our development framework have so many players coming into that space, to the extent that sometimes you find that there's also parallel activities taking place to the exclusion of other important sectors that may also need support. So the unpredictability of flows really makes it difficult for us to effectively implement our medium-term expenditure framework in order for us to attain the development results that are envisaged from the plan. The other issue that we have seen is that the country has not fully developed its data and information systems to the extent that we do not have a very high level of automation among our players or in the development ecosystem, in the development cooperation ecosystem, to the extent that we find that our partners have each different systems that they are using to sort of document the information around the funding or flows that they are providing to us, and therefore we find that there are information gaps. The government may require a certain level of detail, for instance, in terms of the support that's coming through, but maybe that information is not collected and analyzed by our partners to that level. And this makes it very difficult then to really fully account for what's happening in the various spaces of our development programs. And because of this lack of comprehensive information, it has made it very difficult for us to undertake effective monitoring and evaluation of development impact that's arising from the various support that we receive as a country. And this, therefore, is difficult for us makes it difficult for us to be able to see the impact of the aid that, or the support that we are receiving from the various players in the development cooperation ecosystem. We have seen also that with the onset of a broader approach to looking at development cooperation, we have brought into the space the private sector as one of the key players also in the development field, because they play a key role in the development of framework of our country, and therefore most of the development programs that we have put in our plan, the expectation is that the private sector will be the drivers of those programs. For instance, the big infrastructure programs in energy, in transport, communications, and others. But we have seen that although we have formed development advisory groups, which have been segmented around the key pillars of our plan, with the private sector mapped and included in terms of being participants in those advisory groups, we have seen very low participation from the private sector. And as a result, we are not effectively able to capture the contribution of the private sector to the development discourse of the country. And so the information and data that we receive in terms of how much is being invested in the development agenda of the country is quite limited. When this gets down to the regional level and sub-national level, like the provinces and the districts, the information flow even becomes very precarious. And this is because the local authorities and other players at that sub-national levels do not really have very developed systems to capture information in terms of what support is taking, what is happening in terms of the contribution of various players at their levels. So this, it remains a big challenge that we think we need to look at critically and see how best it can be addressed. Therefore, because of this lack of information or inadequate information, we find that even the disaggregation of data in terms of impact that's coming out of support from various partners cannot happen. We are not able to tell what the impact of this support is on various age groups.
Ms. Kama, my apologies to intervene. You have 1 minute to go. Thank you.
Thank you. So the other issue has to do with the fact that we have very limited processes in terms of assessing development impact. We do not have very developed monitoring and evaluation systems that can help us to see who is being left behind in our development process, despite the fact that there are various players providing financial support to various sectors. For this question, I end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kamau, for providing us with examples of challenges as well as opportunities faced in the efforts to deliver effective development cooperations. We note that the panelists repeatedly highlighted the need of strengthening the coordination mechanism, the data infrastructures and the collections, and especially the predictability of funding, so where we can build a trust and ensure predictability and the development cooperation based on the national priority. So now Dr. Anthony Swan, the Director of the Development Economic Sections at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. Dr. Swan leads on development financing and development economic policy issues, and he also served as a Director of Financing and Debt Sections, where he developed Australia's framework for sovereign debt exposure in the Indo-Pacific. So, Dr. Swan, how can new evidence from the GPEDC monitoring contribute to the improved quality of financing for development at the country level? And you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me begin by just thanking our co-hosts for this important side event. I can't emphasise, in the context of FFD4, how important it is to be talking about evidence to support the quality of financing for development. And we need to be able to continue that effort as we go forward to understand the impact that we're having on the ground and to enable us to course correct as required. Let me just give I'll be brief, some so reflections from an Australian perspective, and then noting that Australia isn't the world, sort of broaden out. But Australia has a new international development policy as of 2023. And one of the key changes with our policy is the way that we engage at the country level. It means that we have, for all of our bilateral relationships with developing countries that we provide support to, and we have a development partnership plan. And that plan is where we go into the country and we really focus, we try to strengthen our engagements along the, along the development effectiveness principles around country ownership, focusing on results. Obviously, we want impact. We want to be inclusive. We're not just talking with partner government representatives. We're talking to communities, to CSOs. We're supporting CSOs as well in countries to give them voice and to participate in the way that we engage and inform how we engage. And then lastly, there's transparency. Australia's beefed up its transparency in recent times. I spoke yesterday at an ERT event and just want to emphasise the importance of transparency in the way that data is being captured but also being used, and just how important it is for the work of GPDC to be provided that evidence at the country level. And I've just loved listening to the vignettes from my co-speakers here, colleagues here, of how they've engaged in the process that they've gone through, the monitoring process, and the sort of, I really get a sense of the strong ownership that they have and understanding and ways in which they want to make progress. And so being able for the countries that we engage with to have that evidence and country buy-in and the data and the transparency and then the whole of society approach around it, really reinforces this new approach that Australia is taking in terms of country engagement. Let me just highlight that there's so many challenges at the country level that makes the work that we do rewarding but also challenging. There's in our region we have more frequent disasters that are becoming having greater impact in our region. There are economic shocks in the Pacific. They're isolated. They're tiny countries. Many of them have high levels of debt, and they're removed from this digital progress that many countries are able to harness. So there are challenges, and there's also food insecurity, and there's also conflict. So we need to operate in this environment and understand how the country's own approach to tackling these challenges, what that is, and so that we can back their country-owned plans and strategies. So having that evidence of the process, of who's engaging with that, helps us to work out how to target our support. It helps us how to identify, where we can have the most impact, also through different modalities, and how to course correct. And in terms of the quality of financing for development, it's not just that, it's also the quantity and the impact, and then so being able to tell a story to our taxpayers, who in large part are providing the resources for this for our development program, is incredibly important. And so the work and the evidence that's being generated, and where we can see progress, or where there's regress, we can demonstrate that we are focusing on that. Really emphasises and build support and confidence and trust in us from our taxpayers that we are actually, making a difference. So let me just talk about modalities because that's really important. We have stepped up our budget support in the Pacific area. We have committed to multi-year support, and part of how we've been able to do that in that case is the confidence that we have that how that's being used is done effectively. And so, the data that's being collected through GPEDC monitoring really contributes to that in the broad. And so I just want to emphasise that those modalities really help us as a donor to be able to justify those particular types of support. We're also looking at, not just grants, that's very important to Australia, but we're looking beyond grants and loans, particularly for infrastructure projects. And we want to be able to invest in renewable energy systems, for example, often through countries' own state-owned enterprises. And so for us to be able to have confidence that government systems are effective, both in terms of how financing is channeled through budgets, through PFM systems, but also that there is capacity there and accountability to ensure that there is ongoing focus in terms of ensuring that, for example, infrastructure is maintained and operated and delivering for its people. So this is the sort of evidence that we need to be able to put money in a lot of bigger quantums into financing these sort of projects. But we also need to understand that debt is being managed well, because if countries enter debt distress, that means that as a responsible lender, we need to pull back. But that we want to be able to engage before that happens, and so this evidence that we're talking about is super critical. And just lastly, we're also pivoting towards supporting blended finance to enable the private sector to support sustainable development at a much larger scale too. And I'd just like to highlight the work that GPEDC does on ensuring that private sector engagement is really, that people have, the citizens understand how that is transforming the country and have voice, and also have access to participating in what the private sector is engaged on. So just to say that our blended finance work that we do is this is super critical to understanding that it's actually going to have a long-term impact. I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swan, and all the panelists for your insights. So we will proceed to the second session right away. And moving on to the second panel, we want to look ahead at what the implications of the changes in the global development cooperation architecture that we are seeing today, and how it will look like in 5 years in post-2030 years. According to the OECD report, in 2023, total ODA provided by DOC members rose to an all-time high of $224 billion, a 47% increase since 2015. However, focus on quantitative targets alone are not enough to achieve sustainable development. The fragmentation of the aid system persists, with more than 200 international organizations and funds channeling almost half of the all ODA. So to answer some of these questions, I will invite our next panel, Mr. Luca De Fryer, who is an active member of CSO Partnership for Development Effectiveness, in short, CPED, and acting co-chair of the Global Partnership. And also Ms. Julia Ban, the head of Secretariat of International Forum on TOSTI, who has more than 30 years of experience working on the development cooperation. So first, Mr. Fryer, What does CPDC's country-level experience tell us about the development cooperation landscape today vis-à-vis the operational environment for non-executive country-level actors? And the second question is, how has it changed since 2015, and what is needed by whom at FFD4 and the post-2030 to make progress on inclusive and whole-of-society development efforts? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you. Would like to thank the organizers for this event. And if you agree, I'm going to skip some of my message and I'm going to focus just on a few points. But firstly, I would like to start by thanking the country of Zambia, Nepal, and Yemen, because they are demonstrating how the effectiveness framework, how the GPDC partnership can actually work in practice. And this has been very, very interesting conversation about their experience throughout the monitoring exercises. It's great they have completed and they are reaching or have just reached the finding stage and discussing the findings with different stakeholders, including CSOs. So my first point is about really the landscape as you were referring to, Chairperson. And the landscape since 2015 has changed dramatically. And specifically, if we look at the scenario of the last 4 or 5 years, we have to take notice that the scenario has worsened significantly. Because of a number of global challenges, we started with the COVID-19 and the social restrictions measures that were required, which implied in practice also restrictions to CSOs. And then the geopolitical crisis across the globe in many parts of the world, and all these elements actually have generated very negative impacts on CSOs. And there is plenty of evidence, not just coming from the CPD, but coming from other sources, our friends from Civicus, and official sources, including the OECD. OECD has been publishing reports on ODA going through autocratic regimes. So there is plenty of evidence that is demonstrating that this environment has worsened. And obviously, when you have these global challenges, the most fragile segments of the social fabric are suffering the most, CSOs included. And so that's the current scenario that we have to deal with. I heard many references today and the previous days to important issues, including fragmentation and predictability. Obviously, predictability and the lack of predictability is affecting badly all kinds of actors, including CSOs. And it's a fact that we are having this meeting today. In the ODA landscape, it is changing very quickly because of unilateral decision. This is a fact and not even a comment. So the second last point, as I want to really be brief, is about the FFD conference. And, well, what we can expect from this conference, well, there's plenty of CSO demands that have been captured in many documents, the CSO FFD mechanism, for instance. But when it comes specifically to this conversation on aid effectiveness, well, it's obvious that we believe that the development effectiveness is a package that must be preserved in its own integrity. So it's great to see the country ownership is being elevated according to the zero draft. But things such as mutual accountability, again, coming very clearly, transparency, focus on results are equally important. So it's very important that in the next stages, all these elements are properly acknowledged. And also, as this is one of the strong elements of the GPDC, the whole of society approach, acknowledging, even within FFD4, that there is a plurality of actors that have a role in financing for development, including civil society organizations, and in general, civil society communities across the globe. So we are expecting all these elements to be further strengthened in the language. We count on the fact that GPDC is so strong, apparently, given the fact that the room is full here today, as a good example of the need for these principles to be fully acknowledged. And we look forward to the discussions to come, and when it comes to the GPDC, to the publication of the next comprehensive report in 2026 that provides much needed evidence. I can stop here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cryer, for your insights. Julia Ben for her intervention from the perspective of TOSD. So could you please briefly tell us first what is TOSD and why it's important in development cooperations? And also, could you please, and noting the recent evidence from global reports, what does TOSD's evidence say about the development cooperation architecture and SDG financing trends? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel today, and I'm happy to briefly present TOSSD. So it's like a 1 minute maximum explanation. So TOSSD, it's an international standard for measuring financing for sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals. It measures flows from the recipient perspective, including all providers and frameworks of collaboration, all financial instruments, and countries can therefore use TOSSD data to map their official development support much beyond traditional aid. I want to emphasize that TOSSD is not a measure of donor efforts. So ODA has been serving that purpose and will continue to do so. TOSSD is a measure of what is actually coming to the countries in terms of broad development support. And I should say that TOSD also includes data on contributions to global public goods, so we call it global and regional expenditures. There's also a component which is called BOMLES private finance, but those two components are always presented separately from the flows that go directly to the countries. And I think in the context of the GPDC, so it's these cross-border flows to developing countries that is the most relevant component. Now, what does TOSD's evidence say about international development cooperation architecture? So TOSD really fosters transparency on development cooperation much beyond traditional ODA. It includes non-concessional finance. Australia mentioned blended finance operations. We have a kind of full picture of multilateral organizations, interventions, both core and non-core, and importantly, South-South cooperation. So as such, the framework of TOSSD, it reflects the changes or presents evidence of the changes in the international development cooperation architecture. We have collected data since 2019, expenditures, and the week after next we will be publishing the 5th TOSSD dataset, and you will see there, for example, that the number of providers of South-South cooperation and their reporting to TOSSD is increasing, and the types of activities that they're reporting are also more varied this year. So since we're running out of time, so I'm not going to give you numbers about total TOSSD and so on, but I wanted to emphasize what has changed and how this relates also to the Financing for Development conference So there's certainly a change in international development cooperation architecture and financing for development, and we have heard actually several countries say that today their budgetary and planning mechanisms or processes, they consider the full spectrum of financing for development. So it's no longer kind of only about ODA going to the countries. There is certainly an increase in the reach and diversity of South-South cooperation, and here I would like to emphasize that South-South cooperation providers, they do much more than in-kind technical cooperation, if you like. And for some South-South cooperation providers, the volumes are actually, quite substantial. There's also increased support identified as contributions to international public goods. So the issue of refugee costs, I mean, that's something that kind of pops up in the statistics straight away. But also seeing it that way, it's a form of transparency. It's, one cannot deny the issue that a big part of development finance, or ODA, if you like, today actually relates to the refugee costs. But again, the support to refugees, it's not only an issue for the traditional providers. So in our data on TOSSD, we see that South-South cooperation providers also wish to report the expenditures that they have in supporting refugees in their countries. Now, coming to the FFD4, I would have 4 points to mention. So we see some very positive elements in the zero draft, and we appreciate really the explicit mention to monitoring the delivery, effectiveness, and impact of development cooperation in all its forms, drawing on TOSSD, and we were very pleased to be next to GPEDC in that sentence. And we expect and we really hope that these references remain in the final outcome document, because then they can help us to take this work forward. A mandate for interoperability and collaboration across data reporting systems, that is another element which we appreciate a lot. And in a kind of a more fragmented world, this interoperability between systems will be really key for collating a comprehensive and global dashboard of data, ensuring then the transparency to developing countries and data users. A renewed call for different financing modalities and arrangements to support developing countries. So here, well, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's about the different modalities that we are discussing. So it's not, there have been changes. And here, maybe what I would say is that maybe this is the area where GPEDC maybe also wants to evolve and think about how the good work that GPEDC has been doing on traditional aid could be then expanded to these other forms of development cooperation. I was very pleased. Actually, I have looked at the monitoring surveys of Zambia and Yemen and Nepal, and I was thinking in my mind, well, where could there be opportunities to maybe broaden a little bit the analysis to these other forms of development cooperation. My final point, it's about inclusiveness. I really want to emphasize that, and based on our work on TOSSD, we are convinced that this is really the only way to make long-lasting progress on financing for development. It's this open, inclusive, and transparent discussions. And TOSSD and the International Forum on TOSSD, it's a demonstration of this. And I think GPEDC is also a demonstration of that. So it really is important to have all stakeholders around the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the in-depth presentations. It was very much helpful. So that concludes our panel discussions. We are running a bit late, but since we are all here together today, we'll spend a few more minutes on the Q&As. And now the floor is open for any comments and questions to the panels. And please press the microphone button, indicate that you wish to make a statement or questions, and also kindly mention your affiliation before you speak. And we do have the panel's experts from the government and the CSOs, but the participants, I saw the RSVP list. There are actually many experts in this room. So not just panels, but please feel free to intervene if there are any questions. So floor is open to everyone now. Oh, yes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Annalisa Parr from the International Aid Transparency Initiative. My question is about the zero draft outcome document, which currently makes no reference to transparency in development cooperation, despite it being a key principle of development effectiveness. So this is concerning, especially since transparency was explicitly recognized in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the IATI specifically. And my question, in an era of declining trust in international aid and multilateralism, we cannot really afford to move backward. And could we call on this panel, along with member states and stakeholders in the room, to ensure that transparency and IATI in particular, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, is explicitly included in the outcome document, reinforcing accountability and strengthening trust in development cooperation? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any comments on these issues? I personally fully support your statement. Yes. Yes, Luca.
We, the GPDC, had this day, and this is exactly one of the things we have been trying to highlight over the past few days, that the entirety of the effectiveness principle should be properly included in the outcome document. So transparency and mutual accountability, if I may say so, because from a GPDC perspective, both are equally important, and mutual accountability, if I may so, even more transformative. You cannot have mutual accountability without transparency, but mutual accountability is supposed to change the relationship between donors. So the two things should be really be restated. And so, on the basis of this input, I would like to invite all the country delegations to note down this important amendment to the outcome document and to work with us, the GPDC constituency, to make sure that the entirety of these principles are fully acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak. When we talk about transparency, actually we called for it during the FFD4 contributions, but when we're talking about standards and minimum standards, we need a definition for that. Which standards that you're talking about? Now, when you go and sign an agreement for like 4 or 5 years, and then on one side you provide everything you want, that the donor wants, and it is cancelled, and the institutions that are supposed to do that work for you is cancelled. And when we have a plan of $22 million to support our fiscal and monetary policy, and it's cancelled in 1 day, how can I do it? How can I do? But on the same thing, when we come to talk about transparency and we come to the GPDC, it scores 0 when it comes to the organizations, the aid organizations in sharing their country plans on public. They don't share it. When we come to the country engagement note or the country plan for that country, they don't share, because they, especially in conflict affected countries, it comes to something called like, they start doing the fragility assessment, the conflict assessment, how to do it, and only 70% have done it. And when it comes to implementation to prevent conflict and to do it, only 60% have done it in their programs. So when we come to the politicians and the taxpayers, I think that's where we have the problem, and we need to wear their cap. We as countries, we've been going through all these paradigms and theories, from modernization to neoliberalism to Washington Consensus to good governance. We've been implementing everything they want. And now it's a new era. It's all about recognizing that politics is important in development, and I think. And I'll summarize that. I think that there is a need for fundamental change on the work of these aid organizations to move from that idea of that institutional constraints and incentives structure, favor the traditional technocrat approaches. We need to respond to these politicians. We need to be right with them and improve ourselves from inside, whether a country that we receive money or organization aid, so that we can be adaptable to their policies and to the taxpayer requirements.
Thank you very much. I was just informed by the Secretariat there is another meeting coming soon, so I'll just take one more last question. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you indeed, all the co-sponsors for organising us around this important table. My name is Donald Cronin. I'm the DPR of the Irish Mission, and I think it's very useful to shine a very strong light on the effectiveness principles that need to be reinvigorated. I think it's a very challenging context. We've seen fragmentation, political contexts in donor countries are changing as well, and that becomes a challenge. But I think FFD presents us with a moment to try and, as you've written here in the bump beforehand, reaffirm the validity and the integrity of the effectiveness principles, and very strongly endorse as well amongst that list of principles being the transparency. Yes, there needs to be that accountability. The early evidence from the surveys that are done so far that we're hearing shows not a huge amount of work being taken forward on mutual accountability at the country level. I think it was 2 out of the 9 countries had some examples of that. So I think we also have to think very long and hard as well as to what that mutual accountability can look like. How can we, in practical terms, implement it? Where are the best practices for where it is happening? And how can we, amongst ourselves and with each other, find ways and means of taking it forward? So thank you indeed. Very useful discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your comments. So I will briefly wrap up the meeting, and thank you very much for your time. And so from the discussions today, more development cooperations does not always mean that it's a better development cooperation. And both are equally important, and both need to be elevated in the discussions towards Sevilla, so we can strive toward a sustainable development beyond in 2030. And then one of the key issues, the transparency is accountability, that's clearly interlinked with the importance of the data collections and the follow-up mechanism. So monitoring and follow-up process is actually the key enabler that will make our commitment into actions. So in that regards, Korea will also be convening the 8th Busan Forum this October in partnership with the GPDC co-chairs, partner countries, and all stakeholders, so that we could continue our discussions on GPDC following the adoption of the FFD4 outcome document. And we hope the upcoming Busan Forum would make the FFD4 follow-up process more robust and solid. And thank you very much, Ambassador and panelists, again, for your sharing your experience and experiences and the views, and all participants for joining the meeting this afternoon. So we have one more day to go for the Precom, and I wish all of you to a pleasant stay in New York and safe trip back home. Thank you very much for joining us today. Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador.